All right, everyone, welcome back. So I said that I was going to deconstruct the new behind the scenes video. I can't actually, um, what's the word, like show you the video because I think YouTube would see it as copyrighted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the link in the caption below. So you can watch it. I would encourage you to watch it. And it's one of those things where you have to watch it a few times because there are scenes that go by really fast that you don't always catch the first time. But I do think they say some really interesting things here. I'm going to say up front that I'm going to give you a spoiler warning. Um, Not because I know anything for sure, and it is stuff that I'm pulling off this behind the scenes video, but there's things that tell me about someone who's going to die, not a main character, obviously it's not Daryl or Carol. So I feel like I'm giving spoilers doing this, and so I just want to throw that out there. Because of some things that it shows us. But I don't know whether you take that as spoilers or not. If you've watched this behind the scenes thing, it's nothing that you can't see in that, but even so. Okay, so these are the things that jumped out at me. I just took screenshots as I was watching it on YouTube. First of all, Nicotero says this has been a voyage of discovery for both of them. And I think that's true. I mean, we have Daryl kind of, you had everything with his grandfather. You have him exploring a relationship with Isabel that was cut short. And of course, with Carol, we had her looking back over what happened with Sophia. I can see actually from this how that's going to continue specifically with Carol. But the other thing is that I just feel like that's really a hint. It's a voyage of discovery. Something else they say, and maybe I'll wait till we get to that part about like Daryl really dealing with romantic feelings and discovering that for himself, I think is a big part of it. So that line jumped out at me. Um, skip over that. So this part also, I just wanted to point this out. He asks if they know how to sail, and we specifically see Carol laugh and say, "How do you think we got here?" And so, of course, this is meant to be funny. She's like lying. Neither of them have any idea how to sail. But this is actually a throwback to season 5 and Carol lying about who she is and also it being kind of comedic. So that's what I first thought of. I was like, oh, it's like she's doing that again, which is very in character for her. So it's not like weird. But the last time we very specifically saw her do that was season 5 at Alexandria. So there's that. They have nothing except each other. I don't know what I was thinking when I took that one. Okay, somebody else sent me this too. Isabel says they want to explore the idea of love in the apocalypse, which is great. That tracks for us, right? And bodes well for us. But the funny thing is, he says it as though it's never been explored before. Someone sent me this, and um, yeah, that was what they were saying is like, okay, but we had Rick and Michonne, and we have quite a few people who have had partners. We had oh, who else? Obviously Maggie and Glenn, and Carl and Enid, and even Jerry getting married. I mean, we didn't see a whole lot of the development of that relationship, but still, he got married, he had children. Then we have the teenagers in the world beyond, and we have plenty of people in Fear the Walking Dead. We had Dwight and Sherry, we had Morgan and oh dear, I'm blanking on her name, but he had a relationship, and you know what I mean. So it's not like this is the first time they've ever explored love in the apocalypse. So it's kind of funny that they're making a point of saying this and letting us know that this is what it is, because they've done this with a lot of other characters, right? Even Carol. I didn't even say Carol. Carol and Ezekiel. Carol and Tobin. We've seen this before. So it's interesting that he's saying that. Like they're making a point of saying that and that that is a theme. Um, I also think it's interesting that even though Daryl has had theoretically, two previous relationships with Leah and then Isabel, they didn't say that those were exploring love in the apocalypse. This is. Think about that, right? Which is not anything we haven't thought before, but just goes to show that neither of those were his true love relationship, right? Okay. So I said in a previous video that we were going to see more of him watching couples, right? And this is it. So we've got Justina and Roberto is a love story, and we see Daryl watching them here. And so that's what I was talking about when I saw that. We're going to see more of this and him obviously wanting this romance for himself. Now, this is kind of interesting. This guy who was talking about it says that specifically the Justina and Roberto story is a Romeo and Juliet forbidden love story. I don't know how it's forbidden, like that, it doesn't really show us this, but that does suggest that one or both of them may die. In fact, it kind of suggests that both of them may die. And it also feels a little bit to me, remember that last season, Oh, I should have looked up names because I don't remember. There was the nun who was with Isabel, and then she kind of fell in love with a boy that kind of even looked a little bit like Roberto, and they both were killed by the end of the season. So we're kind of seeing maybe a replay of that a little bit. So we have that in one couple, and in a way, that's very much a parallel to Beth and Daryl because at least the way he would see it right now, he thinks she died. And so it was, I guess it wasn't really forbidden, but it was it ended tragically. That's all I'm saying. And this couple that he's watching, if it ends tragically for them, then that's what it's going to remind him of is losing Beth. And then we have this is the one that was mentioned in the YouTube comment. We have a relationship between Paz, this is Paz, and her lost love, Elena. Now, Elena, I believe, is the one who's being given away to these other people in exchange for guns. All right. So I actually think this might be where they see each other. She looks back and sees Paz, and I don't think I captured it, but it shows Paz looking shocked. So I actually think we're going to see that moment where they see each other for the first time. And it's been 10 years, but the town is offering up one of them. I believe it's Elena. And this is probably her mother who is sad that she's going. And then this is where Daryl is talking to this guy and saying, so this is what you're doing. You know, you're giving up one of your daughters for guns. And he says, well, this guy calls it security. I call it extortion. But then we get a little bit more of the conversation here, and he says, but if it helps us survive, that's all I want for my boy. Now, this is the first time that I ever realized this man has a son, and I believe his son is Roberto. So when I said this, we're going to see, I understand a little bit more how this is going to go for Carol in terms of her figuring stuff out. This man that she's drawn to and apparently going to have a relationship with has a son who isn't that much older than Henry. So where she was dealing with the Sophia of it all last season, I think she's going to be dealing with the Henry of it all this season. And remember that Roberto, if I'm right about who all these people are, um, it sounds like he's going to die, right? If he's in the Romeo and Juliet relationship. So the town is making this deal with the devil right here. This is Roberto. I think this is his son. And it really looks like his son is either very badly hurt or has died. And then we see Carol looking, I think she's looking at him holding his son. At least that's the way it's portraying it in the trailer, always remembering that sometimes things can be spliced together. So she's very sad and she might watch him lose his son. You see what I mean? So I didn't realize that before. That's the first that I'm realizing that. So that's kind of interesting. Um, and then it talks about Daryl learning how to process his feelings, which I think, you know, this is where they say he lost somebody in France. They mean Isabel, and he's learning to process his feelings. And I think, again, it's just like a big replay because it took him lots of seasons to process his feelings before, and it felt like he finally did, and he became more present again, and that's when he started taking care of Rick's kids and things like that. But now we're seeing him go through it again, just in a more collapsed timeline, and it just feels like it's leading to, you know, obviously his happy ending, whoever that is, and we all know who we think it will be. This is okay, so this is another really quick shot. I had to try like 4 times to get the screenshot because it goes by so fast. This does seem to be Roberto, so I don't know, maybe in that previous shot he didn't die, he just got hurt really bad. They seem to be hoping he'll pull through. But again, because they called it a Romeo and Juliet story, I'm not terribly optimistic that he's going to pull through, but we see Carol, you know, sitting with his father and hoping he'll pull through. But I did like this line. This is something Norman says. He says it's about holding on to family and holding on to passion. So, I mean, the whole season, they're going to be dealing with losing people, losing close family members, whether it be to death or to being taken away from them. You know, like this girl is given away, and basically being willing to fight for that, being willing to fight for to keep your family in some way. And then he says, and passion, which, you know, you can have passion even for familial relationships, but that does sound like it's talking about romance, right? So yeah, guys, I mean, this season was was constructed specifically for us, the hopeless romantics who love that about The Walking Dead and are especially looking for Beth and Daryl. So I'm really excited about this season. Um, and then this might be the last picture I have. I think it is kind of near the end of the video. We see Melissa speaking, and she says, "It's the last thing in the world I would have thought would happen, or I would think would happen." Now, we have no idea what she's referring to when she says that. It's just like a random thing they put in there, and obviously it's to make people go, "Ooh, what is she talking about?" if Beth does return at the end of the season, I don't think she's saying this because she didn't know. Let's just put that out there. I think Melissa has known exactly what's going on with Beth's arc since season 5. But I think she's sort of putting herself in the shoes of the viewer as a way to say it's the last thing most people are going to be looking for to happen. That's kind of what I think this means. Because I do think that, and I've said this many times before, I think the main actors who are in it have known everything all along. They have so much say and so much input, and there's so much evidence from what they do say that they've known for a long time, and they just, can't talk about it very much. They say things that are very vague, right? So some examples of that are, most of these I've talked about before. Andrew Lincoln giving that interview about Beth deserving that death or Emily deserving that role in that kind of death. It doesn't make any sense unless he knows she's returning. Otherwise, it sounds like he's kind of being a douchebag, but he's not, right? Even the way he says it, he's being very sweet and very genuine. So clearly he knows that it's about more than just what happened in Coda. I talked a little bit in the last video about Daryl changing his mind, and I didn't actually talk about this example, but I remember that I picked that up, the whole changing his mind thing, in episode 603, I think, which is where he leaves Abraham and Sasha and then goes back to them. And I went, that was so weird. And it didn't explain why he did that. It didn't explain what his logic was for doing that. And then somebody actually sent me part of an interview Norman did where it was like a panel and he was asking questions. And someone asked about that, like what was the reason that he went after Rick and then decided to go back? And Norman didn't really give a concrete answer. He just said, well, I can tell you that it's about more than just Rick. Like there's a lot more to that. And it kind of made it seem like, he didn't want to give spoilers and we needed to wait until later in the season and it would be explained, but it never was. Like to this day, it hasn't been explained. That tells me that Norman knows what the symbolism of that is and why they put it in, but he couldn't talk about it back in season 6. So that sort of thing. And I kind of think that this is kind of what Melissa's doing here. Like she 100% knew this was going to happen and has known for a long time, but she's sort of speaking in a way as if she were a viewer and didn't know and just saying, yeah, you guys aren't going to believe it. It's the last thing you would ever think would happen. And yeah, I'm thinking that probably has to do with Beth showing up. So at least I hope so. So yeah, this is mostly what I have for this. Some really interesting things. But again, to get back to the thing that is maybe the most astonishing, I guess, is this relationship. These two had a relationship, were separated for 10 years, and stumble on each other again. And you can even see like the way they're dressed is almost Beth and Daryl coded. I would say this is more Daryl because of the ammo. She feels like she's a rough and tumble kind of character, can definitely survive. And this woman is, at least because of the way she's dressed. I mean, we don't really know anything about her personality, but she looks very, very feminine. She's wearing very feminine clothing. And so I think that would be Beth, especially if she's the one that gets taken, separated. And to me, also, this almost backs up some of the things that we've said about maybe him finding her again and then her getting separated from him again, right? Because that's what's happening here. They see each other again, and if I'm right that this is the girl who is given away, which it definitely seems to be showing that in this particular video, behind the scenes video, then as soon as they find each other, they get separated again because she's being given away as the sacrifice for the town. So I do think that we're going to see something like that with Beth and Daryl. And that would kind of explain why maybe he would see her at the end of the season, but not, they're not going to have much interaction or much screen time together, because maybe he sees her and they see each other very briefly. Hopefully they get to talk, but then something happens and she gets taken away again. So we're going to have another search, another example of him chasing her and trying to find her, just like he does with this girl. Only this girl, clearly he's not in love with her or anything. He's bringing her back to her lover in this case. And so that's going to be a foreshadow. Now, you could also relate that back to what happened in season 5 when he did find her. He saw her at Grady for just a moment, it was barely more than a glimpse, and then she was taken from him. So people were really pissed off about that. And, understandably so was I understand. We wanted more than that, but it wasn't just, this is yet another example of why I can promise you that was not just the writers being assholes to us about Beth and Daryl. There were so many people who thought that and said she didn't deserve that, and they were just jerks, and they were terrible to her character, and she deserved better, and all of that. And it's not that you're wrong. I mean, clearly, I agree with you and all of that, but it was planned that way because it was a foreshadow of what's going to happen when they do come back together. So it wasn't just them deciding not to give her a good send off or to give her a really senseless death because they just didn't care or something. No, no, you guys, this was always a foreshadow of what was going to happen when they come back together. And now we're seeing that play out in Daryl Dixon season 3, but between these other characters, right? Which is a foreshadow of what's to come for Daryl. So that is super significant. And yeah, like I said, this came out. I had several people send it to me, so thank you for that. And I know that others have posted it. And yeah, I was like furiously taking notes because there's some really interesting stuff in this. We're going to be seeing several different relationships. In fact, you know what? Hold on. I just wanted to show you what some of my fellow theorists said about it. W.D. Way said, I'm thinking that the character, the female that wears the hat and films so much with Norman, I'm getting the vibe of character Denise. There's also a scene where we see Daryl watching the young couple kissing and looks so sad. It immediately reminded me of him looking back before he entered the tunnel and seeing the two people holding hands. Of course, the only person we've ever seen Daryl kiss is Isabel, and I'm sure in that moment he's remembering her. I don't want to belittle his emotions, but I don't think it's just one emotion for one person. I think it's a lifetime of regret. But how much can you get from a 4-minute clip? Haha. But as different previews come out, it's more and more apparent that they're going to focus on Daryl's emotional past of love lost. And then Galadriel Jones says, I just love that Zabel says it's a look at love in the apocalypse. It seems like possibly the season will pressurize Daryl reuniting several lovers while Carol finds a new relationship, likely temporary, but it still looks romantic. We could see something with Daryl finally just like breaking down and acknowledging what was taken from him and asking why everyone gets to find love except for him. And then like in the last moments of the season, that's when we find out about Beth. Either she shows up or we hear her voice or the edit cuts or pans to a shot of her somewhere alive. I sort of think that for that to happen, he will possibly talk about Beth at some point in the season, or maybe Carol will tell her new lover man, the Spaniard, about it. Maybe he will ask why Daryl is so sad, and she'll open up and tell him that it's because he lost a girl a long time ago and never recovered. In some ways, I don't want Daryl to talk about Beth. It's almost more pressurized if he never does, but if instead Carol does. So the audience gets to be reminded about Beth, but Daryl doesn't have to face it yet. In this case, if and when she shows up, he will lose it in some ways. And I think we've definitely discussed this before, but it feels like he hasn't talked about her in part, maybe because part of him believes she might have survived. Like maybe he did see something that kept hope alive, even if it's just delusion. We know that Daryl is highly capable of delusional behavior. This is just a thought, though. Ultimately, I think however they choose to do it will work. And so then I jumped in and I said, yeah, I love that. While reading about what you wrote, I thought of the part in this video where Daryl is watching the two lovers. It would be cool if Carol was talking about someone to him and that became a voiceover while we see Daryl staring at these two in a longing way. Of course, that's my imagination working over time on headcanons. Yes, and so then we kind of go back and forth talking about it. So you get the idea. I mean, we're all kind of thinking the same thing here. And anyway, so that's about all I have to say about that. That is my deconstruction of that, and everyone go watch it if you haven't. And yeah, beyond that, I will be back in a few days to do some more asks. Bye.